Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Luca, and in today's video I want to guide you through the whole process of creating a beautiful and functional portfolio in Framer. The portfolio in question is the one on the screen. Let's reload it. Here's the preload effect. Then we have the hero section with some scroll transform animation. Then we have a masonry grid for the projects you have worked on. We have your skills section, your process section, all with animations, testimonials, and about me with this up here animation, and finally a way for clients to get in touch with you. We are going to build this from complete scratch so that you can master the basics of layout, responsiveness, animations and effects, accessibility, SEO, and everything in between. In the description I will leave 2 free remix links, one for the starter file, which we are going to cover in a second, and one for the free remix link for the finished project. I suggest you get the starter file and then follow along. You can also take the free finished project, so that if you get lost at any point in time you have something to reference. What I'm going to do now is remove my webcam from the screen so that you can focus entirely on building the template. And also, before we get started, real quick, if you like these types of videos, please leave a comment in the description below letting me know, so that I know if you want to see more of this or prefer some more typical tutorial, much shorter videos and more focused on only one topic. And that's basically it. I don't want to lose any more time for this introduction, and let's get started. Okay, so here we have the starter file where we are going to build our portfolio. I will leave the remix link for this starter file in the description so that you can grab it completely for free and follow along the whole tutorial. As you can see, I haven't built anything yet because I want to guide you through the whole process and understand every step of the way. The only things that we have on this starter file are some assets that I'm gonna explain right now. So starting from the components, we have the logo, which is a very basic logo we are going to use in the navbar. Then we have 2 custom code components, which are the preloader and the text selection color. These are gonna help us make a couple of effects that are hard to make in Framer. So these are gonna make our life easier. For example, the preloader is gonna allow us to make this preload effect much easier. And the text selection color allows us to choose which colors we want to use when we are highlighting text. So instead of using the default of the browser, we are going to use this custom effect, which uses the same colors as the rest of the website. Then in the styles we have some text styles. We have the H1, so the main heading of the website, and then we have all the subheadings, which are the H2, H3, H4. And finally we have the body style, so the style we are going to use for the bulk of the text, so all the paragraphs are gonna use this body style. We have 2 style links, and one for the links in the navbar and one for the links in the text. Finally, we have 2 colors. We are only gonna use black and white for this portfolio, as you can see. And that's basically it. The preloader you see here in the code section is actually the preloader you see here, so it's the same effect. And yeah, I think we can get started with actually building the portfolio. Okay, let's start creating the first section in our website, which is gonna be the navbar. If we go to the live website, we can see that the navbar has 2 main components. One is the logo on the left, and the other are the links on the right. And these links do not point to other pages under the website, but rather to sections on the same page, as you can see. We are gonna learn how you can do this in a second, but first let's create the foundation for the navbar. Actually, before we do that, let's change the background color for the canvas from white to black. Perfect. When it comes to navbar, I usually like to start creating them using the built-in navbars that Framer offers. So if we go to Insert, Navigation, you can see that we have a set of 6 navbars we can use for our project. We are going to use the first in the dark section. The first thing I do is to change the size. I usually like to use the fill, and also I always set a max width of 1400 pixels. This ensures that the layout doesn't break when the website is being viewed on a very large screen. You can use the max width you want. This is a completely arbitrary number, but I find that 1400 pixels is a good number. Let's start editing the navbar. The first thing we want to do is to separate the logo from the links. We can easily do this by selecting the entire component and changing the distribution from start to space between. Then we can change the logo from the Framer logo to the one we have previously created. We can drag and drop it. Also, let's remove the left padding. Perfect. And we are also going to change the links. We only need 4 links. And one is going to be for the portfolio. One is going to be for the process. One for the testimonials. And one for the about section. For now, we are going to use the style we created for the body. Perfect. And later we are going to add the links when we have the sections. We can also remove the background because we are going to use the background that the website has. If we now try to preview, we have a beautiful navbar. Now that I noticed this, there is also a line here that we want to remove. So if we select the component, we can see that there is a bottom line here that we are going to remove. And now we have the navbar. I also like to give a padding to the right and left of the breakpoint, so that even if a user sees the website on a screen which is 1200 pixel width, it doesn't see everything on the border of the screen. I usually go with a 40 on the right and 40 on the left. Now that we have the navigation, I also usually create a main frame which is gonna take the whole width, and for now we are gonna give it an arbitrary height so that it fits all that we put, everything that we put in there. And we are also gonna adjust the height of the breakpoint to fit the content. I usually call this main. And finally, we are gonna have the footer down here. We're not gonna build it right now, but we are just gonna place it there as a placeholder. Same here, fill and an arbitrary height. And we are gonna call this footer. So this is the basic structure I always have on my websites. So a navigation, a main, which we can also add an accessibility tag for the main, and this helps visually impaired users and also search engines better understand how the layout works on the website. And finally, we have the footer, which we are gonna build later on the video. Alright, now that we have the navbar in place, we can start designing the hero section. We're gonna do this by creating a frame inside our main section. We're gonna give the main some layout. We're gonna give it a distribute start so that everything inside the main is positioned starting from the top of the main. And we can leave it as it is for now. Actually, let me give it a max width of 1300 pixels for the same reason I mentioned earlier, so that the layout doesn't break on bigger screens. We can also take the ear, let's rename it to here, give it a fill with the fill, and for the height let's give it, for example, a viewport of 90 dH. This means that the hero section is gonna take 90% of the viewport height. So now that we have the hero in the container of the hero in place, let's look at how it is designed. We can see on the live website that it has two main lines. One that contains the first part of the name plus this little description, and the second one that has the second part of the name. So we can start by creating two frames inside the hero. Similarly, we are gonna give the hero some layout so that we can style it more easily, and we are gonna give the two frames a width to fill, and for now we are gonna give it an arbitrary height, let's say of 200 pixels. Now let's start adding the text. So for example, here on the first line, let's rename this to first line so it's easier to understand. We're gonna type in the first part of the name, and we are gonna give one of the styles we created previously. To do this, we can select the text, go to text, styles, and select the H1. Great. Now it is being hidden because the text has a position absolute, so you can drag and drop it this way, but the layout is gonna appear weird when you publish the website. So better to place it inside the first line and give the first line a layout, so that right now we have the word in the center of the first line. We can also adjust it now to be height to fit. Perfect. And we can remove the gap between these two lines, now that I see it. And we can eliminate the other frame and duplicate the one, so we have less work to do. We're gonna call this second line, and we are gonna write the other part of the name, so Vasquez. Perfect. Now we are only missing the description, so let's add some text here, and we are gonna take the description from here, copy and paste it over to our website. One thing we want to do here for the first line is to align things to the bottom. However, as you can see, the description is much lower than the heading. That's because the heading has a much larger line height, which causes this space in the bottom. To solve this, we can wrap the description in another frame, set the width to fixed to 300 pixels, and the height to fit. Now we can change the text from fit to fill and give some padding bottom. Perfect. In this case we gave a padding bottom of 30. We can change the text style from this to the body. Now we can change the gap here from 10 to a much larger one, like 145. So it is now distributed in the center, but there's some space between the name and the description. Instead, the second line we want to align it to the right right side of the screen. So as you can see, it is aligned with the navbar we created. So we can select the second line, go to distribute, and now what we can do is rename this to description so that it's easier to understand. And we can remove the background from all the frames we created. And as you can see, we now have our hero section exactly as we have on the live website. We also have an effect where the text goes away when we scroll, but we are gonna implement this later on the video when we are gonna add all the effects to our page. Okay, we are making very good progress with the website. Now the next section is one of my favorites, which is the portfolio section. As you can see, the portfolio section has a title that says selected work, and then we have this very peculiar grid with some images of recent work that are grayscaled, but when you hover over them, they become colored. I'm gonna teach you how you can do this in a second. So let's start build this section together. The first thing we want to do is to draw a frame that is gonna work as the main container for both the title and the grid. So let's draw it. We're gonna call it portfolio. As always, let's give it width to fill and an arbitrary height for now, but later it will be fit. As you can see, this is a step that kind of repeats itself every time you make a new section, so keep this in mind. Another thing is that we don't want this section to be attached to this one, so we want a bigger gap. In this case, I usually go with 150, even 200 if you want more space between each section. I like to have some space, so I will leave it to 200 for now. So let's add a title. Let's say selected work. We're gonna give it a heading 2 style. So as before, we're gonna go to text, styles, heading 2. Awesome. And we are gonna draw the grid here. As always, the portfolio container needs to have a layout. We're gonna make distribute center and align left so that the text aligns on the left. Our grid, let's rename it to grid, is gonna have a width of fill, and for now, as always, let's make it height fill, but later it's gonna be fit. Let's also give some gap in here between, maybe 50. We can remove the background for now. Now, how do we build this grid? The idea is to have a grid of 5 squares per 5 columns per 7 lines, and then we are gonna merge some of them so that they become a bigger picture like this. I'm gonna show you in a second. So let's start by drawing one of our squares. Let's give this grid a layout. This time, instead of using the stack, we're gonna use the grid, and we are gonna go with 5 columns and 7 rows and a gap of 25. Now, if we duplicate this multiple times, you can see that we now start to have an actual grid. Okay. So, for example, if I wanted to create this image, I would want to take one of the frames and give it a span of 3 columns per 2 rows. And as you can see, we now have a square in the grid that takes more space than the others. We can delete some of them. Perfect. How do we make the image, the grayscaled image that goes colored when hovering over? We are gonna create a component, so let's select the frame we just created. Right click, create component, and let's call this grayscaled image. The idea here is that we want to fill it with an image, which is going to be a variable of the variant. So create variable image, let's call it image, okay. We're also going to give it a default. I like having defaults as it makes things easier. We're going to take it from Unsplash. Let's search for website development. Let's choose a random one like this. Perfect. What we want to do this here now is to go to styles, add. We're gonna add a filter to be grayscale, and we're gonna give it a value of 100. Now we're gonna create a hover state, and when the user is hovering over the component, sorry, we want this variant will be triggered, and we want the grayscale to go from 100 to 0. So right now, if we try to preview this, it changes. Let's give it a span of 3 and width of 2 rows, and also white is small, okay, because we need to change the width from fixed, sorry, to fill, and height from fixed to fill. Perfect. If we try to preview now, we can see that when we hover over, we get the colored image, and when we are not hovering over, we get this grayscaled image. Now we can just repeat this process for the other images. So this is gonna be a 2 rows for 3 lines. So let's duplicate this and give it 2 columns and 3 rows. Perfect. We have a bit too many frames. Let's remove some of them. Then one which is gonna be the same as this one, just in another position. Perfect. And finally another one which is gonna be 4 columns and 2 lines, 2 rows, sorry, like this. Then we can fill all the blank spaces with some of the frames we have. Let's move this here. Oops, let's use the arrows. Perfect. And we can remove these frames as they are no longer needed. We can then give all the frames that are not images change the visibility to no. Actually, change my mind. Otherwise they won't be seen. You want to change the opacity to 0 so that they still work as placeholders. Let's select all of them and give it an opacity of 0, like this. Perfect. And remove the background here. And finally we can change this from fixed to fit content. And as you can see, we now have the same effect we have here. We just need to change the images. Let's take some random images, like app development. Let's just search for application. I don't remember what I searched for when choosing the images. Let's do this one, and I think this one. Awesome. And now we also have the second section of our website, which is the selected work, and it has this beautiful effect which triggers triggered when you hover the images. Alright guys, we are making very good progress with our portfolio. We already have 3 sections in place, the Navbar, the Hero section and the portfolio. Now we are going to add the skills section, but before we do that, real quick guys, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This little support costs you nothing, but it helps me create and publish new resources to help you learn Framer. So thanks in advance, and let's build this section together. So let's start by analyzing the layout. As you can see, it is basically a grid with 2 columns and 2 rows. And we have 3 sections that are identical, apart from the content, and one where we have the heading. So let's see how we can build this in Framer. Let's start by creating the container for this section. We're going to rename it to skills. As always, we'll give it a width to fill and an arbitrary height. So let's say 700 pixels. Now what we want to do is to give this section a layout to be a grid with 2 columns and 2 rows. And we will increase the gap to 25 so that it matches the gap we set for this other grid. So now let's create the 4 sections inside this grid. Duplicate this, perfect. We are going to style these 3 together as they have the same style but just different text. So let's select all of them, remove the fill and add a border, a white border. Let's also remove the background from the container so that it's easier to understand what we are doing. Let's reselect all of these, and what we want to do is to add a layout in the vertical direction. We want to distribute it to the center, so because we want the text to be here in the center, but we are gonna align it to the left so that it is in the center vertically, but it is aligned on the left. We are also going to increase the gap to 16 and give a padding of 42. Perfect. Now we can start creating the content. So let's start typing. We are going to change the style of the heading from the default one to the heading 3 we created. And to add the description, we are going to duplicate the heading, change the styling from an H3 to the body, change the width from fit to fill, and finally copy and paste the content from the site. Why have we changed the width from fit to fill? Because if we left it to fit, it would overflow as the content is longer than the card. Let's see. As you can see, it tries to fit the content, but as the card is shorter than the content, then more than half of the sentence goes out of the view, which is not what we want. This can be easily fixed by changing the width from fit to fill the card and go on another line when the content is too long. Now we can just duplicate this, copy and paste to the other cards and change the content. Let's do this real quick. Branding and also the text. Awesome. One thing that is still different in our project is that we have a fill for the heading, while here we have an outline. So we are going to select the heading, remove the styling, change the color from white to black so that it matches the background color, add a text style, a stroke to be precise, and select the color white. As you can see, we now have the same effect we have on the live website. All we have to do is to repeat the same process for the other two cards. So change the color to black, add a stroke white, and also for the third card, remove, change the color and add a stroke. Perfect. We are only missing the heading, so let's remove this and duplicate the web design. And we can select the card, remove the border because we don't need it, remove the description because we don't need that as well, and we can change the distribution from center to the start of the card, and we can change the style from H3 to H2. And as you can see, we now have the same section, we just need to change the heading. Last two important things I always do is to rename each layer. So we are going to rename this from stack to heading, and this to the name of this service, in this case UX design. Oops. And here branding. And finally we are going to remove the fixed height we set previously. We are going to set it to fit, and we want these cards to be a little higher, so we can either increase the padding on top and bottom or set a fixed height. In this case we are going to set a fit height of 300 pixels. As you can see, it seems a bit broken. This is because we need to change the advanced settings for the grid. The width we can leave it as it is, but we are going to change the height from 200 fixed to be fit content. And now we have our skills section. Awesome. Now that we have the My Skills section, we are going to build the next one, which is going to be the Process section. As you can see, the Process section is actually very similar in design to the My Skills section. There are just a couple of differences. For example, here we have the title, which is above the grid rather than being part of the grid. And also we have a grid which is not 2 rows per 2 columns, but rather 3 columns per 2 rows. So let's start building this. We are going to duplicate this section we just created, as it is pretty similar to the one we have to create. I'm going to rename this to grid, and we are going to understand why in a second, because we are going to use this as the grid, so this part of the section, and then we are going to wrap the grid plus the title inside another frame, which is going to be the process section. So let's do this. Let's start by adding a frame outside of the grid. We are going to change the height to fit, give it a layout in the vertical direction and align things on the left. Also increase the gap to 50. And we are going to add a title here. We can copy this and paste it inside our stack. And we can also change the name to the stack of the stack to My Process. Let's just call it Process actually. And the heading is going to be My Process. Perfect. Now we are going to increase the number of columns to 3. And the fourth card in the grid is going to span all the 3 columns. So we are going to select the fourth card and change its span from 1 column to 3. Perfect. Now we can start designing the card of the grid. As you can see, it is divided into 2 main sections. One is the number on the top left, and the other is the subheading and the short description, which is on the bottom of the card. So let's do this. Let's start by wrapping the heading and the description inside a frame. Let's give it fit with fill and height fit. We can change the gap to 8 and align things on the left. We are also going to change the design of the heading from outline to fill, so remove the outline and change it back to fill. And we are also going to change this from an H3 to an H4. Perfect. We can now add the H3, which is going to be the number. We can do something like this, select it, change it to an H3, remove the fill and give it an outline, a stroke, sorry. Let's change this to 0, 1, and also instead of distributing the content on the center, we are going to set it to space between, so that it is spaced out, so that the number is on the top and the description plus the heading is on the bottom. And we can also change the copy. Let's do this real quick. Discovery code. Perfect. As you can see, we now have the same design as we have on the live website. We can actually rename this and also remove the other 3 and duplicate this one to make our life easier. So we just need to change the copy of each card instead of recreating the style from 0. So let's do this real quick. Change this to 3 columns. Change this. The revisions. We are also going to change all the names for these tags. This can sound a bit tedious, but it really helps speed up the whole process. As you can see here, we have this description that spans the whole card, which is not what we want here. We have a limit here. So let's change this from fill to relative, and we can decrease it to something like 60%. And now we have the same effect we have here. Now we can change the names real quick, and that's basically it for this section. As you can see, it's pretty easy to design another section when you start from another one. As you can see, the next section is actually pretty similar to the one we have just designed, so it's going to be pretty easy. Let's do this real quick. We can actually duplicate the section we just created because it is pretty similar to the one we have to design. As you can see now, the main is overflowing because we have more content than the height. So we are going to change the height from fixed to fit. But for now, we are also going to add a bottom padding so that we don't have the footer attached to the last section. So let's start by changing the grid from 3 columns to 2. We can get rid, actually, let's change this to span 1 column. Perfect. Let's also change the name from process to testimonials and change the title as well. The heading, sorry. Now the design is going to be a bit different. We have 3 main sections inside the card. We have one with the stars, one with the actual testimonial, and one with the profile pic, the name of the person who is leaving the testimonial, and then its role at a company. So let's start designing this. We can remove the 0, 1, and let's add a phosphor icon here, just above the stack. We can actually remove the stack as well. So let's take the phosphor and make it smaller. Let's say 20 by 20, and make it also white and change it to star. Perfect. Now we want to have all these phosphor icons inside a stack, and the stack is going to contain these 5 stars. So let's change the width to fit and the height to fit as well, and let's make the gap to 5. Perfect. We can duplicate this 4 times, and now we have our stars. Let's also change the name to stars. Perfect. Let's change actually the name of the container as well to testimonial 01. Perfect. Now we'll have some text which we can copy and paste. Now the styling is black, so that's why we don't see it. Let's change it to the body style we have, and let's change this the width from auto to fill, and we are also gonna move it below the stars. Perfect. And finally we'll have the last section inside this card, which is going to have the profile pic, the name, and the role. So let's create a stack to contain all these 3 things like this. Let's move it below everything. Now let's add the profile. Let's start from the profile pic, which we want inside the frame we just created. Let's call this profile, and it is going to have a layout horizontally. Let's align, actually you can leave it as it is. Let's change the photo pic, perfect, from 50 to 50 pixel in width and 50 in height, and also make the profile fit the height of the content. Let's select a random pic. So actually let's use Unsplash, search for man, and let's choose a random one like this one. Now, as you can see, which is actually the same photo by the way, as you can see here we have a border of 1 pixel white, and also the image is grayscaled. So let's do this. Let's select the pic, go to styles, filters, and grayscale, and give it a value of 100, and also a border which is going to be white, 1 pixel solid. Perfect. And now we can add the name and the role at the company. So let's distribute things to the center. We are also going to have another frame inside this one to contain the name and the role. For now we can give it an arbitrary height and width, so let's say 250, and we're going to change the profile, the width of the profile to fit the content. Now let's see here the gap, we can increase it a bit, I guess, maybe 25, looks perfect. And let's change the frame we just added. Let's add a layout to be vertical, and we are going to add some text. So the name, Sean Doe. We are going to use a style which we have not selected, which we have not previously created. That's because not everything has to be one of these styles you have here, because sometimes you'll have these little details which are going to be a bit different from the styles we have created. So it doesn't make sense to have a lot of styles just for these small details. Let's change the name to be 20 pixel white, and also make it bold. Perfect. We can align things on the left. Let's duplicate this and change the styling. Here we are going to use 12 pixels regular, and we're going to use a fictionary role, so managing director at Apple. Let's add this. We're going to decrease the gap we have here to 2. Change the height and the width to fit content. Perfect. And remove the background we have on the frames. And voila, we now have the testimonial card. All we have to do is just duplicate this for the other 3 testimonial cards and just change the name and then all the info. So the actual testimonial, right now we are using a placeholder content, but we should change this, and then just change the profile pic and the name. I'm going to cut this part because it's going to be a bit boring, and let's build this next section in a second. Alright, I've just finished creating all the testimonials cards. I've also changed the placeholder text we had with some fake reviews. I asked ChatGPT to write them. Now we are basically almost done with the layout. We are only missing the About Me section, a simple Get in Touch section, and then the footer. Now, let's start with the About Me section. It is pretty standard. We only have some text on the left and an image on the right. We can do this by creating a frame, which is going to act as the container. As always, we change the width to fill and the height to an arbitrary height, which we will change later. We can also give it a layout. We want the direction to be horizontal because we want 1 column here and 1 column here. And we can increase the gap to 125. We're also going to change the name of this tag to About. Perfect. Now we can draw the stacks inside here, so 1 here and 1 here. We're going to select both of them and change the width to fill and also the height to fill. We can rename the left one to text and start typing in the text, so About Me. Now we are going to change the style of the text to be the H2, so text styles H2. As you can see now it's floating. We don't want this, so we're going to select the text and add a layout, and we are going to leave everything as it is except from the align, which we want to be on the left, and also increase the gap slightly. Now we can duplicate the About Me text, and we are going to use this text as the bulk of the story. Let's copy and paste this inside here. Perfect. We can now change the width to fill and change the text style to body. And as you can see now, if we remove the background, we have our text in place, which is perfect. All we have to do is to create this image with this effect here. Let's see how we can do this. Firstly, this frame is going to act as our image. We're going to use a component, so right click, create component. Let's call this personal image. Perfect. What we can do now is firstly create a variable. So variables image, and then we're going to leave the name as image, and we are going to upload a photo. Actually, let me use a splash. So let's say man, and let's use this one. Awesome. This image, this variable we just created, we are going to set it to be the background of this frame. So fill set variable image. Perfect. As always, we want the image to be grayscaled, so we can select the whole variant and go to Styles, Filters, Grayscale. And we can, if we leave the value at 100, it will be completely grayscaled. Now we want to create this effect where we have basically an inset of the image. So the border isn't here, but it gets inside the image. We can do this by creating two frames that are going to act as this part. Okay, this square here is actually a black square on the top left of the image, which has the same color as the background, which is why it looks like it is the background. We are going to change this to 150 pixels of width and 150 pixels of height. And we are also going to change the fill to black. We can now duplicate this and move it to the bottom right. So the bottom right will have the position absolute, and the constraints will be 0 on the right and 0 on the left. The top left will still have position absolute, but the constraints will be 0 on top and 0 on the left. We can also rename these two frames for clarity, so this one is going to be our top left, and this one is going to be our bottom right. Perfect. If we try to preview now, it's pretty similar already, but as you can see, we also have a border to the whole image. So let's create this. We're going to select the variant, and we are going to give a border white to the whole image. And we also want a border here, so on the bottom and the right side of this square. So let's add it, border white, and we can change the where we want the border by selecting this, and here we can change the top, right, bottom and left width of the border. We are going to set the top and left to 0, so that we only have it on the bottom and right, and we are going to do the same, just the other way around for the other square. So border white, and let's set the right and bottom border to 0. Now if we try to preview, we'll see that we still see the border of the image, which is not what we want. To change this behavior, we can select the two squares we created and increase their z-index value. Let's say we increase it to 5. And now we no longer see the border of the image, but we see the inset effect we wanted. We can also change the height if it looks too stretched, for example to 500. Perfect. We can also change the text to fit. And now we can change the height of the whole section to fit. And as you can see, we now have also our About Me section. Okay, let's now do the Get in Touch section. As you can see, the design is pretty simple. We have a rectangle with a border. Then we have some text and 2 buttons, which we are going to design. So let's do this. Let's start by creating the rectangle, which is going to be obviously a frame. We'll give a width to fill and the height to 500 pixels. Now we can remove the fill color and add a white border. Perfect. And we are also going to add a layout. In this case, we want the direction to be vertical because we want the text on top of the buttons. We can also rename this tag to be, let's say, Get in Touch. Perfect. And let's add some text. So, interested in working together. we are going to give it a text style, let's say an H3. And now, actually, let's do an H2. Or is it an H3? Let's do an H3. And we are also going to break the line after in, so let's do it. And we are going to center align it. Perfect. I think it's right. Now what we can do is to add another frame inside here, because we want this to be the container of the two buttons we are going to design. Actually, let's design the first button. So let's create another frame inside this. This is going to be the buttons container, and it is going to have a width of fit and a height of fit. And this is going to be our button. Let's create a component out of this button. So right click, create component. Let's call this button, actually, perfect. And let's start designing our button. So we have some text and an icon. And we also have an overstate, which makes the color brighter when we hover over it. So let's start by adding some text. So get in touch, perfect. We're going to give the variant a layout so that the content is center aligned. Now we can also change the width to fit and the height to fit. And we are going to add some padding. More precisely, we are going to add 12 pixels of padding on top and bottom, and 28 pixels of gap on padding, sorry, on left and right. Perfect. Now we can change the fill from this blue to white. And finally, we are going to add a phosphor icon here. We're going to make it much smaller, so let's say 22 pixels. We're going to make it black, and we are going to give it a variable for the name. So create variable, let's call it icon name. Perfect. Now we have the basic design. We can actually change also, make the copy also a variable, so plain text, and let's call this copy. Perfect. And now we can add the overstate, which is going to make the color brighter. To do that, we can select the primary variant. Let's call this primary actually, and add a overstate. And in this overstate, we want to change the background color from this white to full white. So the X is going to be FFFFFF. Perfect. And we also need a secondary variant for this button, which is going to be a ghost button. So we can duplicate this to create another variant, which we are going to call secondary. Now we can remove the fill, add a white border, and also make the text and the image and the icon white. So let's change this. Actually, I just noticed that here it should be the black we set. Perfect. And now we can also add a overstate and change all the white we just set to be full white. So let's do something like this. And now we have our two buttons that we can add to our website. So if we go here, we can change the button width and height to fit. We can now duplicate this, change the direction to horizontal, and increase the gap to 24. Remove the background and change the second button to be the secondary variant. Perfect. This is the exact same button we have here. We just need to change the copy. So it's going to be copy mail and DM me on X. So copy mail DM me on X. And we can also change the icon name, so here is going to be X. Actually, I was joking. It's going to be an arrow. How is it called? I guess it's called arrow top right. Let me find. Arrow up right, I think. Perfect. And here is going to be, I think, copy. Perfect. All you have to do now is increase the gap between the heading and the buttons to 32. And we have our section. This is the exact same section we have here. And now we are only, actually I think it's a bit slimmer, so we can say make something like 150 pixels. And now we are only missing the footer. Alright, we are finally at the last section of our design, which is going to be the footer. So let's analyze how the footer is built on the website. As you can see, we have three main sections. One is the top one with the logo and the social links. Then we have a line to separate, and then we have the bottom section, which has the rights and also the design and developed by your name. Now, let's do this in Framer. Let's start by decreasing the padding we previously set on the main. So let's select the bottom padding and decrease it to 150 pixels. Now we can actually design the footer. So select the footer we previously created, right click on it and create component. We can leave the name at footer. We'll give it a layout, and we want to stack things vertically. Align them on the center and distribute them on the center. We can leave everything as it is. The only thing we are going to change is the gap, which is going to be increased to 35 pixels. And we are also going to give some padding, in this case 32 pixels of padding on top and bottom. Now we can design our three sections. Let's start with the first one. Let's set the width to fill and an arbitrary height, which we will later change to fit. We can insert the logo we previously created here. Perfect. We can give this section a layout, distribute things with the space between property, and change the height to fit. Now let's open this so it's easier to understand. We can call this top for clarity, and we can create another stack which is going to be placed here, and this stack will contain all the social social icons, sorry. So let's change the height to, actually let's leave it as it is, and insert a phosphor icon. We're going to change the phosphor icon to be 30 pixels of width and 30 pixels of height, and change the color to white. Now we can select the icons container, let's call it this way, and we can add a layout. Now we can change the width to fit and the height to fit as always. And we can duplicate the phosphor icon 4 times, one for every social media. We can also decrease the gap a little bit to 8 pixels. And now we can insert every icon we have, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. Let's do this real quick. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. Now I want to show you something about icons that you may not know. Let's remove the background real quick because it's quite annoying. Let's place it black for now, but later we will change it to be transparent. Now, when you have icons like this and you want to add a link, you cannot add it directly here. You have to first add a frame outside of the phosphor icon, change the width and the height to fit, and now you can add the link to, let's say, https twitter.com. Also, this is going to help us create an accessibility tag called area label, which I will explain later. Actually, let me explain it right now. So there's something called, if you go to the accessibility section, there's something called an area label. This is basically a label that you add to some elements on your page when it is hard to understand for visually impaired people what this is, especially when talking about links. So if I have a link, screen readers for visually impaired people will be able to read what's inside a link, but when I have an icon, they will not be able to do that. So this is where area labels comes in. We can set an area label to explain to people who have a hard time seeing what we have on the design, what they are seeing. In this case, we are going to set the area label to Twitter icon. And we can repeat, let's also call the container Twitter icon. And we can repeat this process for every icon we have. So fit content, add a link to Instagram, and also give an area label. Later on with the video, I'm going to explain other concepts related to accessibility that you have to keep in mind before publishing a website. But for now, let's do this real quick. So Facebook icon. Fit content, link to Facebook, facebook.com. I set the area label, no, area label, Facebook icon. And lastly, for the LinkedIn icon, size, fit and fit, link to LinkedIn, linkedin.com, and finally the accessibility tag area label, LinkedIn icon. Perfect. Now let's design the line here. We have here. We can draw a frame, set the width to fill and the height to be 1 pixel. We can change the fill to white and set this value to 40% so that it is less eye-catching. And finally, we can create this section. We can duplicate the top we have created. We can move it down here, change it to bottom, and we can remove the logo and add some text. We can copy and paste the text actually, much easier. Perfect. We can change the style to be the body in this case and move it before the icons. Perfect. We can now remove the icons, duplicate this, and make designed and developed by your name. In this case, I'm going to use mine, so Luca da Corte. You can also add a link. In this case, I added a link to my portfolio, but this is going to be your portfolio, so it doesn't make sense to have a link to yours. And finally, we can change the height to fit content. And voila, we can change. We also have to change it here actually. And with this, we have completed the layout for our portfolio. Let's preview this real quick. it looks awesome to me. One last thing. Actually, here we can see that there's something going on with the width. We are going to change this. Actually, from down here, it looks like it doesn't span the whole width, so we are going to check this. It's always useful to preview things, so we get a sense of what's going on. As you can see here, the width of the grid is set to be fixed, while it should be fill. We can change this to the next section as well. This is good, perfect. So if we preview it once again, now it should be perfect. Actually, here we see that the footer is larger than the rest of the design. That's because we didn't set a max width of 1300 pixels. Perfect. Now we have our design ready. One last thing we want to change is to make the navbar functional. Right now we don't have the links to these sections, and now I'm going to show you how you can do this. So let's start by choosing which sections we want to reference with the links. In this case, we are going to reference the portfolio, the process, the testimonials, and the about. So to create a link to a section on the same page, we have to select the section we want to reference and go to scroll section here, add a scroll section, and now we want to give it a name like portfolio. And if you now try to go to our navbar and add a link to the portfolio, you can see that if I select home, I can also select a section, and I can choose the portfolio we just created. And we can also make the scroll smooth, so it doesn't jump on the section, but rather it smoothly scrolls to the section. So if you try to preview now, you can see that if I click on portfolio, I will be moved to the portfolio section we just created. And we can repeat the same process for every other section. A pro tip I want to give you is that if we try to preview this and I click on portfolio, you can see that the viewport is that the start of the portfolio section is going to be at the top of the viewport. If you want to change this behavior, so to leave some space on top of the section when scrolling, you can use this offset value. So if I set it to 25, let's say, and I try again to preview, you can see that now I have a space of 25 pixels between the top of the viewport and the section I just created. And we can basically repeat the same process for every other section we want to reference. So scroll section, we can call this process, give it an offset. Same with testimonials, scroll section, testimonials, offset of 25 pixels. And also with the about section, so scroll about 25 pixels, and we can add the links here: home, process, smooth, link, home, testimonials, smooth, and also about, home, about, smooth. Perfect. And now let's check whether they all work. Yes, they seem to be working as expected. Perfect. Now the design of the desktop version is basically ready. But before the website becomes publish ready, there are still some things to do. Firstly, we'll create the preload effect and every other animation we have on the website. Then we are going to make the website responsive. And finally, I'm going to go over some considerations you need to keep in mind in regards to accessibility and SEO. Now that we have the full design in place on desktop, we are going to work on making this page responsive on tablet and mobile devices as well. For reference, we are going to look at how the live website displays on these different breakpoints. To see this, we are going to use the developers tools, which you can access on your browser by right-clicking somewhere on the page and go to inspect. Here you can see a lot of different things, but what matters to us is that you can resize the viewport and you can see how the website adapts on different sizes. This is the mobile breakpoint, so we are going to use this as a reference. The first thing we need to do is to add a breakpoint on our canvas. To do that, we can go here and add a tablet. Framer is going to generate another version of our site for tablet devices based on the primary breakpoint you have set. Now we can work on making this responsive. The first thing we can see is that the hero section is going to be a bit different. So let's start working on it. We can select it and start by changing the height from 90 ph to 500 pixels. Then we can decrease the gap a bit here to 100 pixels. And finally, we can change the description width from 300 pixels to fill. And just like that, in 20 seconds, we have made the full section responsive. How crazy is that? Now we can move on to the next section, which is going to be the portfolio. As you can see, the layout is a bit different than what you have on desktop, so we need to adjust it. The first thing I notice is that it doesn't have all the spaces we had on desktop, so we need to remove all the placeholder frames we had set. We can select them like this, and then here in the styles you can make them not visible. Now we can also change the number of columns from 5 to 4. And if we select the first image now and make it span 4 columns, just like that, we have made this section responsive as well. Think how crazy is that? We are making the whole website responsive in a matter of a couple of minutes. So let's move on. Let's look at the My Skills section. As you can see, it is identical, so we don't need to change anything here. The process here is a bit different. As you can see, it only has 2 columns and 2 rows. The grid here only has 2 columns and 2 rows. And we don't have any card which is larger than the others, which is not the case here. So we can change this from 3 columns to 2 columns. And we can select the 4th card and change its span from 2 columns to 1. And just like that, we have made the grid exactly as it is here. The only thing we need to change is select the description and change the width from 60% to fill. And we just made the website, and we just made the section responsive. Now we can move on with the testimonials. The testimonials look good to me, so we can leave them as they are. The About Me section looks almost identical. The only thing that changes is the gap between these 2 elements. If you want to see how much gap there is between 2 elements using the developers tools, you can use this inspector tool. And if you click here, you're going to see how much gap there is between these 2 sections. And you can adjust it accordingly. So we are going to decrease it from 125 pixels to only 75. Awesome. And lastly, we have the Get in Touch section. As you can see, this is also a bit smaller, so we can use the inspector tool once again. And here in the model, you see on top of this section, I'm hovering over, you can see it's the size, which is 700 pixels per 400 pixels. So we can change the height here to 400. everything else look the same. The only thing I like to do on mobile and tablet devices is decrease the padding a bit. Usually I go with 30 pixels on tablet and 20 on mobile, because on smaller devices it makes sense to have less padding on right and left. So I usually go with 40 on desktop, 40 on tablet and 20 on mobile. Awesome. Now that in literally 2 minutes we have made the website responsive on tablet, we can move on with the mobile version. So let's add the third and last breakpoint, which is going to be the phone breakpoint. As you can see, there's some work to do, so let's start by understanding how our page will display on mobile. If we resize the window a bit, here is how it will display. Let's start from the hero section. As you can see, the description is no longer on the right side of the first name, so we'll have to change its position. To do this, we are going to select the current description we have, and we are going to make it invisible. What we want to do now is duplicate this description and move it below the second line. And as you can see, we are already getting there. What we can do now is to change the distribution on the first 2 lines, so make it distribute start and on the second line as well. And now the first name and the last name are aligned on the left. And we need to increase the distance between the last name and the description. We can use some padding here. To see how much padding a section has, you can use again the inspector tool. And here you can see the padding, which is 25 pixels on the top and 15 pixels on bottom. So we can adjust it as the browser is telling us. And also I think it is a bit smaller. As you can see, if I hover over the entire section, it is 400 pixels tall, and it also has 100 pixels of padding on top. So we can adjust our version accordingly. Change the height to 400 pixels and the padding to 100 on top. Perfect. We can move on with the portfolio. The first thing I notice is that there's much less gap between the heading and the actual images. So let's see how much it is using the inspector tool. In this case, we can see that it is 20 pixels, so we can adjust it. And the layout of the grid is also a bit different. It is now basically a stack, but with different sizes. We can leave it as a grid for now and change the number of rows, and we can increase the span of these 2 elements and decrease the number of rows they take. Actually increase the number of rows they take. 2, 3 columns, 4 actually. And this should be basically it. We just need to adjust the height of the whole thing. So if I go here, I can see that the gap is, let me check, sorry, the height is is 1180 pixels, so we can adjust it. We can change the height to 1180 pixels, and also change the height from 200 to fit content to field container. Perfect, sorry. And just like this, we have made this section responsive. Now we can move on with the next section. This is going to be pretty easy. We only need to adjust the gap here and change how this is displayed. So let's go here we can change from grid to stack and make it align horizontally, make it distribute vertically, sorry. Now we can also change, as you can see, the cards have now a fixed width and height, which is not what we want. So we can select all of them and change the width to fill. The height can remain the same, except from the first card, which is going to be fit. And we also need to change some padding, I guess. If I check here, you can see that it only has 24 pixels of padding, while here we have 32. So let's change this. Perfect. And also the first section, I guess it will have 0 padding actually. Perfect. Now the process section, very similar to the one we just created. So we need to change the layout from grid to stack, make it the vertical direction, and change the width of each card from fixed to fill. And also change the padding of each card from 32 to 24. I don't know why it doesn't allow me to do it all at once, but we're going to do it manually, no problem. Just like this. Perfect. Maybe the height is also a bit lower. As you can see, there's much less space between the number and the heading. We can inspect this, and as you can see now the card is actually 250 pixels tall, so we can change the height from 300 to 250. Awesome. Now let's move on with the testimonials. Again, very similar to what we just did, so change it to a stack, stack it vertically, change the width to fill, and change the padding to 24 pixels instead of 32. Depending on how long the descriptions are, you can even increase this a bit, maybe to 325 if you don't want it to be too close to each other. I suggest you do it on every card just to make every card equal to the other. Finally, we have the About section. As you can see, we changed the order from horizontal to vertical. So we can do this like this. It was pretty easy. And as you can also see here, the squares we have on the top left and the bottom right are a bit smaller than they are on the desktop version. So we can actually create another variant for our image, which we are going to call maybe mobile, and we can call the first variant desktop, and we can decrease the width and height of these boxes so that they take much less space on mobile. So if we now try to change this from mobile and maybe decrease the height a bit, now it's perfect. Finally, we have the Get in Touch section. As you can see, the buttons are overflowing. We can change this behavior by just adjusting their direction from horizontal to vertical, and I guess decrease the gap a bit. Let me check. Here the gap is 12, so half of what we have now, and also the height of the whole thing is 300 pixels, so we can change this as well. And finally, we can adjust the padding, as I was mentioning. And just like this, we have made the full website responsive in just 10 minutes. Alright, now that you know how to make a fully responsive page in Framer, I'm also going to cover all the basics of animation and effects, and I'm going to do this by adding them on the page. The first one is going to be our preloader effect. So now if I reload the page, we have it's a bit slow. Here we are. We have this preload effect that then swipes up and shows the page. So let's look at how we can make this in Framer. I'm going to start by drawing a frame outside of the breakpoint, like this. I'm going to rename this frame to preloader, and I'm going to make the fill black. Now I want to add the text we have on the preloader, which is going to be the logo basically. So FV. I'm using size 150 and weight bold, color obviously white. And we can add a layout to the preloader so that the logo is in the middle of the frame. Perfect. So how do we add this in on the page? Usually it will be quite complex and you'll have to use a combination of position, absolute, and a couple of other things. But here we are going to use the preloader effect that comes with the starter file I've created. All we have to do is drag and drop it on our page, and we can simply connect it to the preloader we just created and change all the values we have here. For example, we can make it last, I don't know, 2 seconds and exit and a speed of 1 second, and I want it to swipe up. The background we are going to leave it as black. If we now try to preview, here we have our beautiful reloader effect. I'm going to change the timing a bit because it's too slow right now. So something like this I think will work. Perfect. Now let's look at the next animation, which is going to be the text that goes left and right when I'm scrolling. Let's look at how we can do this. So I'm going to select the name we have here, and I'm going to add an effect. I'm going to use a scroll transform. So basically the scroll transform allows you to to change something on the canvas while the user scrolls. So for example, here we have the from state, so the initial state before the user starts scrolling, and I'm going to make everything 1 for opacity and scale so that it is exactly as we designed it. And then the to state is how do we want the thing to change when the user scrolls. In this case, we want to move our name to the left. So I'm going to give it an offset of, let's say, 3000 pixels. Awesome. So if we now try to preview, here we have the from state, which is just the name. And when I start scrolling, the layer will start move to the to state we set, and the to state has an offset on the left. So actually I made it the other way around. Let me change it real quick. It should be minus 3000 pixels. So when we scroll, the name goes to the left. Perfect. We can do the same on the second name, on the last name, sorry. One very cool thing in Framer is that you can copy and paste effects. So if I take the effect I just created, I can right click and copy it and select the last name and paste the effect and just change from minus 3000 to 3000. So let's preview once again, and as you can see, we now have this beautiful scroll effect. Moving on to the next one, we have some, let me reload the website. We have some appear animations for the portfolio. Let's look at how we can do it. So let's select the first image. I'm going to add an effect. In this case, we want the effect to be triggered on up here, and we want it to slide in right. We can change the enter effect a bit, maybe decrease the offset a bit to, let's say, 100 pixels. And we can change the transition to be a bit smoother, so let's say something like 200 pixels of stiffness, 45 of damping, and mass and delay can remain as it is. So when we now try to scroll, why isn't it animating? Let's see. Because it's not on up here, it should be layer in view. So when this layer is in view, the animation will be triggered. In this case, we want to start when the object is at the top of the viewport. So now it should work. Perfect. All we have to do is to copy and paste this exact animation to the other images and just change the value a bit. In this case, we want this to be minus 150 pixels so that it slides in from the bottom left. Also, I want to remove the replay and also the exit animation so that the image only appears once, and as the image goes off the viewport, it doesn't animate once again, which I find a bit annoying. It's a matter of personal preference, so if you want to leave it as it is, feel free to do so, but I'm going to remove it. Let me copy and paste this once again here. We can change here from 0 pixels and 100 here. And finally, paste this and change this to 100 on the right. Now let's preview, and we have our beautiful appear animations. On to the next one. We have the skills. As you can see, the web design moves in from the right, and the branding and UX design slide in respectively from the bottom right and the bottom left. So the animation is going to be pretty similar to the one we just created, so we can basically paste in the one we just created and just change the values. So here we want the y to be 0 and the x to be 100. Then we want the branding to slide in from the bottom right, so let's paste the animation and change this to 75 and 75. The last one, sorry. Paste the animation and change it. It's actually pretty good already, we just need to change it to 75 and 75. Awesome. Let's preview once again. I always preview to make sure we are not missing anything. Perfect. Now the process. As you can see, the process, every card in the process slides in from the left, and there's a small delay between each card, so that this appears first, this appears second, this third, and this fourth. So let's look at how we can make this in Framer. We can select the first card, apply the same effect we created for the sections above, and change the enter from minus 100. Actually, we can leave minus 100, but we are going to change the y to 0. And now it slides in from the left. However, we also want to add a delay, not for the first one, but for the second, the third, and the fourth. So I'm going to copy the animation we just created and paste it for the second card. Here, paste. And here in the enter effect on the spring, we can add a delay for our animation. I'm going to use 0.3 seconds as a delay for the second card. And then for the third card, I'm going to use a delay of 0.6 seconds. And finally, for the fourth card, I'm going to use a delay of 0.9 seconds. I think 0.3 seconds is the perfect number to not make it too slow and not too fast either. So let's preview once again. Every animation seems to work. And here the process works as well. Now we have the testimonials. Let's see how they are animated. These two, this one slides in from the right, this one slides in from the left, this one from the bottom left, and this one from the bottom right. It's gonna be pretty easy. We can just copy these and apply them with the right offset. Sorry, this one is actually already perfect. Let's paste it here, change it to -100 and 0. Here, paste effect, and we can change the enter to 0y and 100x. And finally, the last card, paste. We can change the offset from -75 pixels to 75 pixels. Perfect. Then we have the About Me section, which has one of the coolest animations in my opinion, which is this image. As you can see, it's a bit of a subtle animation, but let me reload the page. Basically, these squares are big when the image first appears, and then they move and they show the image. So let's see how we can do this. Right now we have a desktop variant and a mobile variant. I'm going to create another variant called desktop closed. Let me rename it desktop closed. And what we want to do with this variant is to design the card as it was hidden, so the initial state. We can just increase this to cover the whole image. Same for the bottom right, we can increase it to cover the whole image. And now what we want to do is to make this image go from the closed state to the open state when the image is in view. So to do that, we can add an effect. We're going to use a scroll variant this time. And when the layer is in view without a replay, we want to go from the desktop closed to the desktop open. So basically what this scroll variant effect does is it allows you to make a component go from one variant to the other based on a certain trigger, in this case the layer in view. So if we try to preview, we scroll down, every animation works correctly, and here we go. As you can see, the image opens from the closed state and reveals the image. The very last animation we are going to add is to the About Me, a very subtle appear effect, so that it slides in from the bottom on layer in view. And no replay, no exit effect, and something like 50. Very, very subtle. Now, we are done with the animations on desktop. However, the animations on desktop are going to be a bit different from those on mobile, because obviously if the layout changes, then all the animations should change as well. So we are going to use the developers tools once again. Sorry, wrong option. And if we try to preview the our portfolio on a mobile device, you can see that the animations are a bit different. For example, here all the portfolio cards slides in from the left, so we can change this. Here we can go and select change from 100 to -100, and same for all the other ones. Very quick. And these changes we are making are only going to affect the mobile breakpoint and not the other breakpoints. So if we also wanted to change some of the animations on a tablet, they wouldn't be affected from the changes we have made on the mobile. Actually, we are going to make a couple of changes on the tablet later, but for now let's focus on the mobile because it's the second most it's the most used breakpoint. Then we have the desktop, and tablet is very rarely used as a breakpoint. So there are some people that even don't design for the tablet breakpoint entirely. I suggest you do, but keep in mind that if you wanted to, you could skip this step. Now, same for basically all the other cards. So it's going to be a bit of a tedious process, but we can change everything from their initial state we created to be -100 on the x-axis. And this is already good. This is perfect. Here we go. Last one. Awesome. Everything else can remain the same. Here, let's see how the animations work on tablet. So let's reload the page. We have made a couple of changes. So these two slide in from the bottom left and bottom right respectively. These are equal, these are equal, these are equal. So not many changes. We can just change this one from just sliding in from the bottom to sliding in from the bottom right. So 75 on X and 75 on Y. Same here. We can make -75 and 75. Perfect. And this one we can leave it as it is. Awesome. And this was it for the animations. Now we are only missing a 404 page and then all the little considerations you need to make before publishing a website. So before we move on and take care of the little details, I also want to add a 404 page to this project. In case you didn't know, a 404 page is a page that a user sees when they land on a page that doesn't exist on your website. So for example, if I type in the search bar a URL that doesn't exist, I will see this 404 page that allows me to go back to my home page. While this is not very important on a landing page, it becomes essential on a website with multiple pages, because once you start having a much bigger website, having broken links that point to 404 pages, so that pages that no longer exist, is very easy. So having this page is a very easy way to allow users to go back to the home page instead of seeing an error and bouncing off of your website. So here's how you can do it in Framer. We'll start by adding a new page, and we are going to call this page 404. This page will be, when you call a page 404, it will be automatically shown when a user gets a 404 error in Framer. So I usually go like this. I draw a frame that I call main, and I give this frame a width of fill. Actually, before I do that, I must add some layout to the desktop breakpoint. So I make the main width, fill, and height 100 VH. This setup ensures that the page is always as big as the user's website, as the user's screen, sorry, so that they don't have to scroll, or the page is not as long as the user's viewport, so they see a blank part of the website in the bottom part. So we'll change the desktop height to fit. Now in the main we can remove the fill, and we can start typing our 404 error. We are going to give it the H1 style, perfect. And also we are going to give the main some layout. What we can do now is to add this little description here. So we can duplicate this, change the style from H1 to body, and copy and paste this. Let me do this real quick. Perfect. We're going to break line after bin, so we can just do it right this. We can also center align it. And actually I'm going to remove the body style so that we can make the font slightly bigger, and the line height will make it 1.4. Awesome. And finally we'll add a button. We can just drag and drop it here, and we will wrap this button inside another frame, which will set the width to fit and the height to fit. And we are going to increase the padding of this button container to something like 16 pixels. Perfect. One thing I noticed here is that we forgot to add a link to the button. So right now you can set a different link to each instance of the button. To do this, we are going to edit the component and add a variable. This variable will be a link. Let me find it here. We're going to call it link, perfect. And we are going to assign this variable to our button, so set variable link. And we are also going to create a variable for the toggle, so that we can choose if we want to open a new tab or if we don't want to. In this case, we want the link to go to the home page, and we don't want to open a new tab, so we are going to leave it as it is. We only need to make this page responsive, which is going to be very easy. We can just add a tablet and it already looks good. And finally, we can add a phone. Now it doesn't look as good. We'll change the description to fill. We'll remove the line breaker we set manually, and we'll decrease the size of the text to something like 16 pixels. Maybe we can give some padding to the main of 20 pixels on right and 20 pixels on left. And I think it's pretty good. We can actually make the 404 bigger, so let's say something like 150. I think it's perfect. Now let's change the copy of the button back to home page. Back to home page. And we can change the acronym name to arrow top, how is it called? Arrow up right. Here we go. So now if we try to preview, we can go back to our home page. Awesome. Finally, our website is basically ready. It was a long ride, but we are getting very close to the end. Before we hit publish, however, I want to go over a couple of very important notions in regards to accessibility and SEO. So, some of them we have already covered during the video, for example, the area labels for the icons, if you remember. But I'm also going to cover a couple of new concepts. For example, every image on your website should have a descriptive alt text. In case you didn't know, an alt text is basically stands for alternative text, and is the text that will be shown if the user can't see the image. So for example, if the image can't load, then the user will not be able to see the image, obviously, and so he will see the alt text. Alt text is also very important for accessibility because people who are visually impaired will use a screen reader, and the screen reader will read out aloud the alt text you set for the image. So it will help them understand the content of your site even without seeing the site. So in this case, we want to give a descriptive text for the image. We can say something like a hand holding a phone, showcasing forecasting a weather app, let's say. Showcasing a weather app, and you would want to repeat this process for every image on your website except from decorative images. So for example, if I had a background, let's say a pattern which was an image as a background, I wouldn't want to use an alt text because that goes against the accessibility guidance. I'm not going to give every image an alt tag during the video because it will be extremely boring. I've already done it for the template, so you can go ahead and do it for every other image on the page. There are not many, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are only 5 images plus the testimonials, so 8, 9 in total. So it's gonna be pretty quick. Then, always speaking of accessibility, we have semantic tags. If you didn't know, semantic tags are a way to help search engines and screen readers better understand the layout of your content. So for example, here we have a navbar. In this case, we want to use the accessibility tag nav because this helps search engines and screen readers understand that this container contains the navigation for the site. And you want to do this for every major section on your website. So for example, here we have the main. We want to give an accessibility tag, an HTML5 tag. The div you see here is the predefined one because this is a general tag you use in HTML, and we want to change it with something more specific, for example the main in this case. Then we have a bunch of sections, so we are going to select them all and add a tag, which is going to be the section tag. And finally we have the footer, so we are going to add an accessibility tag, which is, in this case, will be the footer. There are some more that we haven't covered in the video. For example, the article, you will want to use it, for example, for the blog, the button for the buttons. Then we have some others which I'm not going to cover. You can find them very easily online, and some of them are very rarely used. So if you want to learn what they mean, very good to know. But in general, you will use the ones I used here in this project. Now we are basically done for accessibility. We can move on to the settings, and more specifically the settings that regard SEO. So the site title, the site language, the site description, and that's basically it. So the site title is basically the page title, but it gets applied to every page on your website, if you don't define a specific one. So for example, if I wrote a site titled, for example, let's say site title, this title will be applied to every page on my website, in this case the home and the 404. And however, if I went here and decided to override this, then this page would have a specific title that I've created here, while every other page would have the default, or you can think of it as the fallback title if you don't choose a specific title for each page. The same applies for the site description. However, the site language is unique, so you set it here in the general settings and it gets applied to every page. So let's start writing the site title. I'm going to take it from our website. In this case, you can see the site title here in the top left. However, I like to use an extension, a free extension called Detailed SEO extension. Here you can see the page title, which we are going to copy and paste here. Then the site language, you can type English. And finally, the description, we can copy and paste and save. Here we also have a preview of how our website will appear on search engines. So this is the title and this is the description. Then we have the favicon and the social image. The favicon is the icon that you see here or even on search engines. So this little icon you see just beside the title. I've already prepared a very basic one, so I'm going to use this. And finally, we have the social image. The social image is the image that gets shown when you are sharing your website on any major social media platform like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and so on. As you can see, the recommended size is 1200 per 630 pixels. So what I usually like to do with social image is take a screenshot of the page using the preview. So I can set the width and height to be the one that Framer recommends. And then you can simply take a screenshot of this, like this. Then you can go here and select it, and boom, you already have your social image. Actually, I've set it for the home. I wanted to set it for the general, so that it gets applied to every page on our website. I usually always start with the site settings. However, I also always go over each page individually. In this case, however, I'm not going to do this for two reasons. One is that the home is always going to be equal to the general settings. So you want the home, the general settings, to reflect what you would write on the home page. And then we have the 404 page. I'm not going to set any of these on the 404 page. That's because you don't really need it, because the 404 page will not be shown on search engines. So the title will be useless, and the same with the page description. And nobody is ever going to share the social image, your 404 page on a social media platform. So you can even not create a specific social image for this page. That said, that's basically it for our website. We can finally hit publish. Framer will automatically give us a free subdomain where we can preview our website. And here we go. We have our beautiful website with animations, with a beautiful structure. It follows best practices, it is accessible, it has custom SEO tags, it has custom HTML5 tags, it has little interactions and animation like this. And it has everything you need to get started on Framer for your portfolio. Before you go, however, I want to very quickly go over resources I created to help you publish new websites. It's the Framer pre-launch checklist, and it's a checklist with 72 points that covers everything you need to make sure you are doing on your Framer website before you hit publish. We have already done everything throughout the video, but it's a very good reminder of everything you need to do. This comes from my experience of working on tens of Framer websites, so you can rest assured that this checklist has everything you need to know. You can even download this as a PDF and keep it on your website. You don't even need to give me your email if you don't want to. However, we have a community, a newsletter, we can call it, where I message you around once or twice per week when, for example, I create new resources, new videos, new tutorials, new templates. And when I launch templates, you usually get a very good discount or even a free copy of the template, which nobody else gets. So if you want to subscribe, I would really appreciate it. You're not gonna regret this. I'm not going to spam you. I'm not going to send promotional emails. I'm not going to do any of that. You can unsubscribe anytime, and yeah, this was basically it for the video. I hope you found it helpful. If you like the video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. And if you have anything you would want me to cover, feel free to leave a comment. And I'll see you guys in the next one.